So now we've covered inline styles via a style property binding as well as the ng style directive. What we need to do now is probably move into a better use case and start to understand how to add classes conditionally. Thankfully, we've pretty much learned how to do it. We can take our existing style knowledge and apply it to classes. We have the ability to use a class binding, and we also have a directive called ngClass, which we'll look at in the next lesson. So whilst inline styles are a perfectly valid use case, they don't allow us to manage our styles that effectively. It's not a great practice to keep painting things in line because it then limits our reuse. So the idea behind this is we're going to start adding some classes, which means that we can move this style into a class selector down in our styles, but also it means we don't need to add styles that don't need adding. So if we need to undo the border, we're going to add a border of none. Whereas when we add a class conditionally, we can just simply remove it. So what we essentially want to do, we have this ability to above specify a class binding, but we also have the ability to bind directly to it and then specify using the dot which class we want to in fact add. So to demonstrate this, we could remove our code and just simply pass in true. So this is then going to add the class of promo to each of our cards. So you can see here we have class equals donut card and then a space and then promo. So even though we are declaring them independently, Angular is clever enough to add and remove them for us. So this means that we now need to set up the class down below for our promo. Now to keep things in line, we're going to call this the donut card promo. So then if we save this out, we can then see our donut card promo. We could then go down into our Sass selectors. We can say ampersand dash and then promo. Now beforehand we had a border which then had a value of 2 pixels solid and then the hex code of EEE. So when we then save this out, we then get our border back. However, it's applied to each individual card, which isn't really what we want. We know about expressions, we know about class bindings, and we know that we can then specify a class using this dot notation. And again, it's really nice because we can then use this dash. We don't need to do things such as camel casing our property names, which would then get translated, because if we were to do this, this will actually print it out as we intend it to. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So coming back to the value, we need to then pass in donut.promo. So because this is going to be false, true, and false, we're then going to only see the class being added on the second item. We then have donut-card. And you can see that we don't, like we did beforehand, we had a border value of none and then a border value of 2 pixels. When we're using classes, this is then toggling it. So it's not just setting an empty class, it's actually removing it altogether. And that's then based off of the truthy expression that is then evaluated from donut.promo, which is true. So it's nice and easy for us to understand. We also have the ability, like with style bindings, to pass in multiple classes. So we could say class dot, and we could say donut-card-new equals, and then true. So we're not going to keep this class name, but I'm going to show you how we can add multiple classes at once. So you can see here that we have the donut card of new. If we then jump down into our next element, so we have donut card, we're then going to have the promo, and we're also going to have the new. So if you want to declare multiple classes, we can do it exactly like this. So that's a nice quick way to start adding classes conditionally via Angular's property bindings. We can then use it alongside this class name. We don't need to worry about interpolating. You may be thinking that we could do something like this. And while we could do this, it becomes a bit more difficult to manage our classes and the spaces between them. So with this in mind, when we come to deal with much more complex classes, where we perhaps want to add some and remove others, we're then going to turn to ngClass, the Angular directive. So let's finish up there, dive into the next lesson and learn about ngClass.